Welcome to Still Untitled, the Adam Savage Project. I'm Will.
I'm Adam.
And Norm's not here this week.
Norm is out.
He's having a baby, or I don't know.
Somebody's family is having a baby, and Norm's helping.
Yeah, Norm is present, we hope. There's still nothing to announce yet as far as we know as of, what is today, Monday afternoon?
I suspected we would know within an hour. He's pretty good about that communication.
I don't know. My daughter was born at the same hospital they're having theirs, and there's a couple of delivery rooms in the middle of the hospital that are absolutely impervious to Wi-Fi and all radio signals.
Yeah, they do a good job at that.
Yeah, it was smart. But we have a guest filling in the Norm shoes.
Ladies, if you've been listening, you don't know that we have a guest, but if you're watching, you can see our guest today is Joe DeRisi.
Hi,
welcome.
Hey,
welcome,
how's
Joe.
it going? Thanks for having me here.
Very, very nice to have you here. Now, you and I met a few years ago because our kids both went to Synergy.
That's right.
A wonderful school that saved my son in sixth, seventh,
religious
and
school,
eighth grade.
No. I wouldn't have thought that about you, Adam.
It saved him with kindness.
Okay, that's good. It's better.
But then I used to do a fundraising thing called Cocktails in the Cave, and where a person would bid on them and seven friends coming here, and we'd mix cocktails and shoot the breeze for a couple of hours.
Oh, that's awesome.
And Joe won it a couple of years in a row, and those 2 years, I don't think I ever met or spoke to any of your friends because you and I just talked to Blue Streak the whole time.
That's right.
And the thing is that you are a scientist and you have a lab in Mission Bay. But the thing that I love talking about all things with you is that while you have a specialty, you're also a very wide-ranging generalist.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I admire the scientists that can really drill down and work on one little thing for 40 years. I mean, there's an important place for those kind of people, but I just get interested in a lot of different things. You know, if someone sends me a dead corvid, I'm going to work on it.
That's exactly my thing. I love dead corvids. Actually, I love live corvids, but if I can find an old dead one, I certainly will remount it.
It's really funny you say that because the common wisdom, I'm a little younger than you guys, I think. But when I was an undergraduate, I got a biochemistry degree, and my advisor was like, "Hey, what are you going to do with this?" I was like, "Maybe I'll go to med school. I don't know. Maybe I'll get a master's." He's like, "Well, look, you have to decide now, because like if you're don't bother with a master's, you're just going to end up sucking pipettes someplace." I was like, "This is incredibly frank advice from a college professor," and I was like, "I really like learning a little bit about a lot of stuff." And he's like, "Well, then don't go into hard science. You need to go to business school, get an MBA or something like that."
What terrible advice!
And like his whole approach of everything I got as an undergraduate was, look, you need to figure out what you're going to do and then devote 30 or 40 years to that and really dig in.
Yeah, I really find that to be a sort of bad attitude. I mean, there's a lot of people who are generalists and want to do a lot of different things and explore a lot of different areas of science. And, you know, you shouldn't try and put those people in a box and make everybody work on something for 40 years. There are those people who can do that and focus on one tiny thing for their entire career. That's great. We're lucky to have them.
Yeah.
I'm not one of them.
But let's also, this is from a philosophical standpoint, it's quite interesting because a lot of the quote scientific debate online occurs between people who are scientists saying, well, science gets fuzzier the closer you look at it. The lines that science tries to taxonomically draw between things, which are great for broad categories, become really useless when you drill down. The categories for gender and sex, for instance, are hotly debated. And in science itself, like when we hired experts on Mythbusters, our worst experts were the ones who were super expert in one field. They couldn't help us extrapolate that to the three other fields we had to encompass in a testing scenario.
Yeah, sure. I just really like having fun. And, you know, there's going to be fun things to work on, something that interests me or catches my attention. I'm just going to do it because I find it interesting and want to go where my curiosity goes. And that's what I tell my students, right? You know, if you're not having fun coming in here and doing this, you're not chasing your own passion or curiosity, you shouldn't be here.
I mean, that was the one good piece of advice my advisor gave me, in fairness. He was like, look, find something you think is fun. Go do that for 40 years. So anyway, yeah. It's but finding the thing that's fun is the important part, it seems like to me. The people who I know who work in science, whether it's in private industry or in public labs, are people who are driven by gaining that knowledge.
Yeah. Have I ever told you about the snakes?
Please tell me about the snakes. I don't think so.
This is a very Hannibal Lecter way to start a sentence.
So, you know, most people, you know, how do they think about a project? You know, they think of some scientific idea, they got to have a journal, they write a grant, they try and get funding for that thing, you know, and that's the way it usually goes. one time I received a letter in the mail. How many times do you get a project in a letter in the mail?
Yeah.
First of all, how many times do you get a letter in the mail? I don't get
useful
letters
letter in the
anymore.
mail.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
I opened up this letter, and it was a typed note with a picture of a woman with a boa constrictor wrapped around her shoulders. And the letter was, "Hey, I hear you work on infectious disease. And Mr. Larry, my boa constrictor, he's my service animal. I'm not sure really how that works, but my service animal,
Yeah.
I'm worried that he's going to get this disease called IBD."
IBD.
And I thought, okay, that's weird. I'm going to put it back in the envelope. But, that envelope stayed on my desk for a while. And then eventually I opened the envelope back up. I called the veterinarian. Have you ever heard of IBD? Is that inflammatory bowel disease of a reptile? I mean, that's weird. Don't they eat just like once a year?
Yeah.
I mean, and he said, no, it's a real thing. There's a disease that's spread from snake to snake. It makes them crazy. And I said, what does crazy in a boa look like?
Yeah.
Right.
It turns out that they do this thing called stargazing, where they point their heads at the sky and they wave gently back and forth
Wow.
until they die.
Whoa.
Wow, so it induces a behavioral change that's sufficient enough to kill them.
It makes him the audience
it's-
member of an air supply concert.
And to be
I was going to say
technically,
fish, but okay.
it's a neurological infection. And if they open up the snakes and look at their brains, they're all messed up.
Wow.
And it's spread from snake to snake. And so it's called inclusion body disease, not inflammatory bowel disease.
Inclusion body.
And it's because there's, big clumps of protein inside the cells that are presumably big clumps of virus, but no one knew what it was. No one had a clue what it was. So I thought, that's kind of cool. Now, Mr. Larry wasn't actually sick.
Okay.
So there's nothing
Okay,
to
good
do with
news
it.
for Larry.
testing.
For Larry.
But, where am I going to get some snakes that have this IBD? So, where do you find samples these days? How do you get
You
them?
just type it into Google on the internet, and it turns out.
Really close.
Okay.
YouTube's better.
Oh, of course.
So you go to YouTube so don't type in IBD, okay?
Okay.
That's going to get
No,
you
we don't
all
want any
kinds of-
IBD videos.
Yeah, right.
No.
That's going to get you things that you
No,
probably
no.
don't
I've-
It's
want
like
to
I've-
see.
searching
look, I
Snow
have a
White and the Seven
5-year-old,
Dwarfs
yeah.
with the safe search off.
Exactly. Instead, type "my snake is sick."
I love the simplest
And
possible.
so I got down to a bunch of searches where it'd be like this guy going, some guy in Texas, "Hey y'all, take a look at my snake. It's doing this weird thing with his head." And and it's the classic stargazing thing. You're like, "Oh my god, that's it."
Sorry, buddy.
And then there was another one. I remember one distinctly. I'm going to paraphrase, not the exact thing, but it was like, "Hey, this is Chad at XXXSnakeCharmer.com. And, Elsie here has just been acting weird lately. She does this thing with her head. And you're like, oh, my God, that's it. So it's everywhere.
Yeah.
You find tons of it. We got it,
So then you send a note to these people,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you're like, "Hey,
absolutely.
your snake is
Yeah.
Now, what is
short
the,
for
what
the
is
world.
the
I'm
etiquette
sorry."
of doing this? Do you reach
Yeah.
out post-mortem, or do you say, your snake is going to die, immediately box him up and send him to me?
First thing you go is find an exotic vet.
Oh, there you go.
Because,
Okay.
they eventually take him to the vet.
Okay.
And you're like, look, if you have any snakes that come in like this, put them in the freezer for me.
Right.
And put the call out to your friends. Now, I didn't realize how successful this would be because one day we walked in, there was a giant Coleman cooler sitting on this step with like a post-it, it was like postmarked to us. And we opened it up, and it was just like bags full of giant Burmese python heads that had been hacked off. Because apparently you can get...
This is much worse than I was expecting it to be. I was like, it's going to be sacks of dead snakes. No, it's just the
Is
heads.
it a zoonosis? Can you catch it by eating
Yeah.
them?
And apparently you can get a sort of a finder's fee in Florida for killing Burmese pythons in the Everglades
Oh,
because
right,
they're
'cause
invasive
they're-
species.
yeah.
And someone thought, I can do science
Oh,
a favor and make maybe a buck at the
But there's
same
no
time.
telling that they're sick or not.
No, there was no
Right.
no rhyme or reason to the dead snakes in this Coleman cooler.
boy.
But we did eventually get real snakes with the real disease. And when, we did our thing on it, which is virus hunting. So our whole shtick in the lab on the infectious disease side is let's use data to tell us what is wrong with an animal or a human.
What does that mean?
So instead of just kind of guessing, like, okay, I think it has the flu, or I think it has adenovirus, or something like this, and you go test for that one thing that you think it's there, we have to discover what's new here. So in essence, what we do is we just sequence the bejesus out of everything. So sequencing technology, reading the nucleic acid, the DNA, the RNA, the stuff of life, that's gotten really, really cheap. I mean, super cheap. In fact,
Like what is super cheap?
The cost has decreased about 50,000-fold in the last 10 years.
So in the 90s, we spent a few $1 billion doing it for one person?
$10 billion for the first human genome in 10 years. You can do it in less than 24 hours for less than $1,000.
Wow.
So it's really cheap.
Yeah.
So we sequence everything. So then actually counterintuitively, but maybe not, the compute to actually do the analysis is getting more expensive. More data, more to compute.
You have a lot of big computers with GPUs and stuff in them, and they're doing all
about
that stuff.
1,000 cores in my lab.
Nice.
So we sequenced the bejesus about all these snakes. Lo and behold, there's a new virus in there, like totally new virus. And it's a relative, the cool thing about it, it's called an arenavirus. It's a relative of the largest family of human hemorrhagic fever viruses.
Like Ebola.
Well, Ebola is a hemorrhagic fever virus, but it's not the largest family. People, Ebola gets all the love and all the scary stuff. But arenavirus, which unfortunately has many different names of different types in different parts of the world, kills way more people by hemorrhagic fever than Ebola. So it goes by the names of Lassa fever, Machupo, Hunin, and many other names. But they're all arenaviruses. If they had one name, they would get the better respect.
Look, a good name goes a long way. When you're naming,
So I have a question about the data crunching.
Yep.
So when you're crunching the sequencing,
how do you find out what's in there?
what marker do you look for to tell you it's a new organism?
Well, there's a bigger problem. How do you know what's snake and what's not snake?
Right, that was where
right.
Okay, so this is a boa constrictor. There was no sequenced genome for the boa constrictor, so that's a problem.
Right.
phase one.
But we get the Cal Academy down the street.
Yeah.
And they've got, the Steinhardt Aquarium there, like some really great snakes. And our friends down there, were offered to take a little blood sample from one of their red-tailed boas. I'm trying to remember the boa's name. I think it was Balthazar.
That sounds like a good boa constrictor name.
And so we sequenced that red-tailed boa, which was not sick, not doing any of the head grazing thing. And by the way, this disease for zoos and aquariums, big deal. If they get a snake that does the head wavy thing, they kill every snake in the facility.
Right, that's like mad cow disease.
The only way to do it is you just cull everything, just scorched earth.
And is it only boas that it affects, or is it
boas
other
and
snakes?
pythons.
Okay.
So it's the boids, the ones that squeeze.
Okay.
Boids.
Yeah.
Wow.
Boids. And so we sequenced the California Academy red-tailed boa, and then you have this reference. And so with the random data you're getting from the sequencing of the diseased animal, you can simply ask computationally, is this a sequence part of the snake or not snake? And so then you just put it in two different buckets. If it's snake, okay, who cares? Just throw that out.
Okay, but there's more than one kind of boa. So if there's a separate boa than a red tail, those two genomes are going to be different enough where the sequence might think one part of one snake is not snake, right?
Yeah, but just like us and chimpanzees, it's like 99%. I mean, you can use pretty much any boa and it'll match.
I see. So
Okay.
you could use any boa,
The
and
match
the virus
is
still gonna
a bit
stand out.
fuzzy. Yeah,
Right.
because the virus shouldn't be in any genome. It should have nothing in there.
Okay.
All right, so we scorched earth sequenced the boa, and then we asked what's snake, what's not snake, and then you're left with only a tiny amount of data because most of it's snake. And in that data, now we search across all known viruses and every other infectious disease and look for distant matches, so really fuzzy matching.
And some of this stuff you're filtering out are things like the gut biome and
Sure.
mites that live on its scales or stuff
Now,
like that.
we did that, but we made sure we sequenced brain tissue.
Okay.
So
okay.
not going to be a lot of stuff in there.
Okay.
Unless it's bad. Right? So yeah, and we
Torment at the brain is fairly
Your brain biome is should be pretty minimal.
absolutely. This is a really important point. There's arguments over this right now. So there's a microbiome in your gut. There's a microbiome in your lungs, on your skin. There's no damn microbiome in your central nervous system.
Or
We've looked.
okay.
And sequenced the bejesus out of cerebral spinal fluid. It's pristine. It's like Evian water.
Okay.
It's really good. People who argue otherwise, I question
But
them.
there's not some weird thing like glial cells have different biomes because they were evolved from some different bath or anything like that.
No.
Okay.
If there's a bug in your CSF, you got trouble.
Okay.
So we find this thing, and then we match it against all the viruses, and we get this distant hit. It's like, oh, this might be arenavirus. But here's the kicker, right? So we're not done yet.
Yeah.
We sequence this arenavirus. Great. It's super cool. It's a new virus. But its code protein, the outside of the protein, isn't arenavirus. It's something else. And its closest family that it maps to is, yes, Ebola.
Oh.
Its the closest member is filovirus. Its outside, its glycoprotein, more resembles Ebola virus than arenavirus.
Wow.
What's cool about that is it suggests that those two families, Arena, the biggest family of hemorrhagic fever viruses, and Ebola, the poster child of all hemorrhagic fever viruses, had some ancient common ancestor. They were the same thing way back in history
wow.
and evolved and diverged out.
Well, does this give us a hint at where these viruses came from and how they jumped to people?
Well, now, isn't that interesting? Okay, because we've sequenced a lot of these arena viruses now, and there's a lot of them in snakes. A much bigger diversity of them than we've ever seen in the mammal ones that cause hemorrhagic fever, which suggests, if you look at the differences between them, sort of geologic timescales.
Well, I mean,
because these things were in dinosaurs.
Because just to be clear, the hemorrhagic fevers are bad viruses for human hosts because they kill us too quick, right? And they incapacitate and all that, right?
So it suggests that the boa and the python are not actually the reservoir because it kills them.
Yeah.
The reservoir would be something more long,
further back, more crocodile-y.
But actually, it could. Anyway, there's speculation.
Okay.
We can get to that.
It's a matter of open investigation.
It is. But it suggests the viruses are very old. They were there a long time ago in reptiles, and that all the viruses that we fear today, everything from coronavirus, which is like SARS or Ebola virus or rhinovirus, they were all in the reptiles and birds before us.
So the dinosaurs are really going to get their revenge after all.
They're still there.
Oh, man.
Now, that's fascinating.
Now, I find it interesting because the reservoir for Ebola virus is still a little hazy, right? Marburg virus, which is a relative of Ebola, that's in bats. Okay? Lots of evidence.
Pretty sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. You can recover the virus from a bat. That's never been true for Ebola virus. Ebola virus from humans has never been isolated from a bat, even though everybody assumes it's a bat.
So we don't know what the carrier is necessarily.
The reservoir for Ebola virus still remains unclear. There's a lot of people working on it, a lot of speculation, and there's evidence, circumstantial evidence that does support the bat, but, I'm not so sure.
Fascinating.
This stuff, okay, so this all started with a letter from somebody who was worried that their emotional support snake was going.
The good part yet.
Okay. Go on.
It's just interesting to me because like the approach that you're taking here, like if I go to the doctor, I'm like, hey, I have a weird rash.
Yeah.
Then the doctor looks at the rash and they're like, this one, it's probably not lupus.
Yeah, or I guess it's this.
Yeah, it could be this or this or this. Let's try this cream and see what works.
Yeah. How about let's not guess?
Yeah, that seems like a much better approach.
Or I can come up with Latin terms for things I still don't know.
That's right.
Well, yeah. So then your approach is instead of looking at the symptom and trying to figure out what the cause is from the symptom, you look at the cause and figure out what the cause. Yeah. This seems like a much really good approach.
Call it hypothesis free.
I will tell you.
I like this.
The way you're talking reminds me of. Do you know John Mayer at Mayer Sound?
No.
Mayer Sound are the guys that made the PA systems for the Grateful Dead, and they basically invented amazing technologies for being able to let everyone in a giant outdoor arena hear the sound all at the correct time.
That's why Shoreline sounds good.
Right.
Yeah.
And we shot a few episodes with them with Mythbusters, and they're deeply invested in sound. But I said to John, remembering my speaker nut friends from the 70s, I said, do you have some special alchemy of the arrangement of tweeters and woofers? And he's like, no, I do it all with data. He's like, the feedback loops are so totally slow compared to computing speed that I can do it all with data. I can, and so they have also now been working on, and there's 5 restaurants in Berkeley and 1 or 2 here in San Francisco, systems in restaurants where they hang microphones at high periodicity, like dozens of microphones. And what they can do is the microphone receives sound, and then before that sound hits the ceiling, speakers can play that sound back and make the room sound like anything.
Sound suppression.
And they can make Davies sound like everything from Madison Square Garden to a Gregorian church.
The Exploratorium has a theater that does that now too, and it's amazing. You're sitting there, it feels like magic.
But you reminded me of John Mayer when you said we just look for the data. Why waste your time with all this other stuff?
We do the same thing for human patients. Someone comes in and has some bad thing, and you can't figure out what it is. Instead of taking the sort of candidate approach and guessing what might be there, you just sequence the bejesus out of everything. Look, every pathogen has DNA or RNA with the exception of a prion, and we're not going to talk about prions. And so,
Okay, don't eat sheep brains. You'll be fine, right?
Yeah, good idea. And so you can just let the data tell you what's there. And it's very, in this way, you can find a lot of surprising things. We can talk about some human patients, too.
Well, but you said that we hadn't yet even
Yeah,
gone to
well,
the
you promised a good part.
All right, so, the end of the snake story is Mr. Larry's still fine. now we know what causes IBD. Zoos and
Do
aquariums
we
and
know
all that
how
stuff.
it's transmitted?
Yeah, actually we did, because we actually did challenge experiments too. So actually, just because you find a virus in an organism, does that prove it caused the disease?
No, of course not.
No. So there's these things called Koch's postulates where, to prove it causes a disease, you got to take the pure organism and you got to inject it into a healthy organism and recapitulate the disease.
Yeah.
And, that's stuck with us for years and years and years, and so we still have to do that. So we actually prepared a large amount of the virus because we could grow it. Actually, how do you grow a new virus like that?
I mean, this is a
an interesting question. How
good
would you do
question. We usually use something alive, right? So you get a live matter,
Okay.
and
Let's assume
put
we're
the
at
thing in there.
UCSF and you cannot bring live boas into the
Oh, is that frowned
facility.
upon? Okay.
Yeah, I called the animal facility. I was like, hey, can I actually bring some boas in? Because, they did fit in the mouse house, right?
I was there, and there were cockroaches or something the last time I was in one of the labs up there. So
I visited the parasitology lab, and there's a lot of wonderful things over
the
there.
ticks galore in there.
Yeah.
Okay, so no, how do you grow?
So usually you find cells that you can grow it in.
Okay.
So what cells? Well, snake cells. So, there's a catalog called the ATCC catalog of organisms, and you can, American type culture collection. You open it up and you go to snakes, and it turns out you can buy viper heart cells.
Oh,
which is pretty cool. We
10
bought
for-
them just
10
because
for
they're
1 penny.
We bought them because they sounded cool.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah,
Viper
right.
heart.
Viper heart. You can buy a turtle, some kind of turtle cell line, and that's about it. There was no boa constrictor
Oh,
cell
wow.
line.
so is there a better catalog for snake cells?
Well, interesting. Again, work the veterinarian network. I called up vets and said, look, if you're going to put down any snakes for cancer, give me a call. Because you want a cancer cell line. Because cancer cell lines are immortal. They never die.
Right.
Oh, fascinating. Right.
But the cell otherwise works the same as
well, they're
more or
screwed
less.
up.
Yeah,
but, for a virus, they don't care.
you don't. Yeah, you just want to see.
We got a call. Vet's says, I'm putting down a boa today. Her name's Juliet. And, she's got lymphoma. Went over there, took out all her organs, put them in dishes. And a week later, one of those dishes was growing cells like crazy.
Okay.
Now
Crazy.
they're from her kidneys, so we call them Juliet kidney cells.
Wow. And
JK.
Which is the new Elvis Costello album.
And so then we put the virus on the JK cells, and they grow like crazy. So now we have our supply of pure virus. And so then we talk these folks into at UC Davis at the vet school over there, because they have these special isolation rooms, which we don't have at UCSF, where you can do animal experiments with infectious agents. Literally the air goes out through incinerators and stuff. So it's really sealed.
right.
Everything's really secure.
I worked at the University of Tennessee biology department. They have one there, and it is a fascinating place.
Yeah, it's a really cool study in architecture and how you do those things.
Oh,
So we
really?
got a bunch of these boas and pythons and tested them, make sure they were clean, and then went over there to inject them with virus. Do you know how you inject virus in a boa?
I do you have to hit
I'm
the
sure that
CSF?
question-
Not hypodermically.
Probably hasn't come up on this podcast
Yeah.
before.
No,
this
it's not
is
something we
absolutely
usually
the
deal
first
with.
time.
Yeah.
We've been doing this for 5 years.
Yeah, six
for
almost.
mice and stuff, it's tail vein and things. That's how there's no tail vein you can find on a boa.
I mean, I assume it's all tail vein in a snake.
So it's cardiac puncture.
Ow!
So it's like Pulp Fiction.
Straight
Yeah, I
to
was
the chest,
just
like
gonna
you
say.
put the marker. He has the hypodermic in the cabinet back there.
Next time I bring an ODing snake to your house, I'll give it the shot.
Oh, it's better than that though. So you got to anesthetize the snakes. They use isoflurane for that. But snakes, when you put isoflurane in a snake, to anesthetize them, but they stop breathing and die.
Oh, that's bad.
Okay, so that's a problem.
So somebody has to give the snake mouth to
what
mouth.
you put. Yes. So what you do is you put a tube down its trachea with a little squeeze ball, so you can breathe for it. You isoflurane it. First of all, the snake is pissed.
I'm sure.
It comes out, it's trying to kill you to get the big glove. I mean,
Yeah.
they know. I don't know how the snake knows, but it wants to kill you.
And pythons have serious they're
boas are strong.
not venomous, but they have enormous fangs.
They have enormous numbers of teeth. They have 4 rows of teeth on the top.
Yeah, they're all
and
designed to take whatever goes in and keep that from coming back
Right,
out.
it's a
Yeah.
one-way roach
Yeah, that's right, it's a
motel of
one-way
teeth.
path.
The
Yeah.
hooks all point backwards.
Yeah.
And they get in your flesh, it's going to be bad.
That's not good. No.
So one person puts the isoflurane over, the other person has to pump the air to keep the snake alive, and then you got to find the heart. So how do you find a heart in a snake that's a tube, basically?
With a thermal camera?
Stethoscope?
I like thermal camera, but those are really expensive.
The stethoscope? You just keep moving down until you find it?
Really close. Use a Doppler.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so
Like ultrasound?
Oh, right, of course.
And then you find the part where it's really beating, and then you get one person then has to hold the tube, imagine it's a tube, and hold the heart in one place, so the heart moves around in there.
Yeah.
And so you kind of squeeze it like a sausage with the heart in the middle.
It's a good thing the
You
snake's
are the
asleep at
greatest
this point.
dungeon master in history. What do you roll for the cardiac puncture? It's a triple 20.
So you hold the tube on both sides, and then the person like takes the syringe and has to like then inject it in the heart. Now, so we brought the vial of virus, which we prepared very carefully at UCSF and packaged in protective stuff and everything. We brought it to this really cool room where we're doing all this. And the
Are you wearing like bunny suits or anything, or is it just masks and shields?
So we just have lab coats on,
Okay.
and that's it. And the lab technician is going to do the injection. So lots of other people are holding different parts of the snake.
Right.
She pulls out the virus in the syringe, and then she turns and she goes flick. You know when you flick the end of the needle to like get the air bubble out?
Yeah, that seems
I
bad with
almost
infectious
crapped my
diseases.
pants.
No,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Because who knows?
She just flicked 1 billion viral particles into the air.
That's the shift between Act 1 and Act 2 of the scariest movie
Yeah,
ever
yeah.
made.
I've seen the hot zone. I know how this works.
I took 3 steps back. Like, what did you?
She's the Gwyneth Paltrow of this
Well,
movie.
Wow.
I guess we're either screwed or we're going to be okay. So let's just keep going.
Right, yeah.
Let's get the snake.
Just to be clear, is this the good part of the story yet? I thought we were pretty good at
No, we're not there yet.
The cooler full of heads, but let's keep going.
She puts the needle in the heart, and then you know it's in the heart because you can see kind of the blood and the needle pulse up and down.
Okay.
That's how you know you're in the heart. Injects the heart, put it out, and then you got to keep the snake alive and get it off the anesthetic, and it's super angry when it comes out of that.
Sure.
Right, you're like, don't be angry. We just
Yeah.
injected you with a lethal
Something
virus.
that's gonna kill you.
Probably.
Yeah, and it turned out so a bunch of the snakes died in the same way that the disease.
So it can pass the blood-brain barrier and all that.
Oh yeah, no
Okay.
problem. I mean,
Okay.
there was viruses throughout the whole snake.
So did you find out the mechanism that the virus gets into the snakes in the first place? Is it just any kind of environmental?
Well, we tested, like saliva and feces and all. It's everywhere.
Okay.
They're just shedding virus like crazy.
Wow.
Not hard to imagine. Okay, that's step 1. We proved the virus is actually the right virus.
Right,
'Cause
right.
Just because you find a virus, something, association is not causality.
It's a good place to start looking.
It's a good place to start looking, is the association. Okay, well, the next kind of wacky idea that came to us in this crazy project was, okay, well, it's got Ebola coat protein. What would happen if we took actual Ebola and try to grow it in our JK snake cells?
Oh, will it grow in the snake cells? Yeah.
Because, the Ebola coat protein in our virus suggests that you could grow Ebola in snakes.
Every time you say JK, I think you mean just kidding, just for
No,
the record.
I
I think
really
he's about
mean-
to talk about J.K.
and I'm the
Simmons.
scientist, and I'm talking
or
about
Rowling.
Juliet Kidney.
Juliet Kidney.
Okay, and I'll say Juliet Kidney in the future.
No, it's okay.
Aren't those both military call sign letters? No, Kilo.
No, Kilo.
Juliet Kilo.
It's not kidney.
It's close though. So, we've got a friend over at US AMRID where they have a biosafety level 4 lab for all that military stuff. And
Could you
You're like,
send
hey,
over the
hey,
idea?
can we have some Ebola?
well, they're not going to send us any Ebola,
Okay.
but we could send them Juliet kidney
okay.
cells
Ah, right.
to US AMRID, and they could put Ebola on there and see what happens. Okay, so they did this experiment. They have HeLa cells; those are human cells from Henrietta Lacks. There's a book on that, very famous. And then they have JK cells. They put them on there, and then they're going to come back the next day and see what happens. Okay, so the next day, the HeLa cells are decimated. They're like dead.
Right.
JK cells grow in happy as clams, like nothing happened. So it looked like the experiment failed because they should have, I thought they would have been infected. They would have died.
Right.
But then they tested for the virus in there. They're making tons of virus. They're infected, but they're not dying.
So you found a really good way. So you called the army and you said, "Hey, we think we have a really good way to grow a lot of Ebola. Can you test it out for us?"
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Wow.
How's that go? Are there other follow-up questions on that one? I assume.
Well, it gets better.
It gets better.
All right, so that's interesting. It means that snake cells on themselves are competent to handle Ebola. Oh, and we sequenced the Ebola that came out of there because what if the virus mutated and it had to jump through some, mutational hoops to get into the cell?
And then it's no longer infectious to humans.
Yeah, exactly. It adapted to the snake cells.
Right.
They could have done that. Viruses grow really fast. We sequenced that virus, and it's identical.
Okay.
It doesn't need any changes whatsoever to infect a snake cell. And the fact that it doesn't kill the snake cell, which we call in the business cytopathic effect, there's no cytopathic effect, suggests that, hey, look, if you were looking for reservoirs, it's going to be an animal that doesn't die from Ebola
Right.
or get sick from it.
Right.
All right. So then the next crazy experiment idea was, okay, well, if that worked, so this is the wacky proposal. So I said, all right, U.S. Ambered friends, what would it take for you to actually infect a live python in the BSL-4?
with
With
Ebola.
real wild
And
type
by the way,
Ebola.
we can tell you exactly
Yeah.
how to hold it down.
No, I assume you don't tell them the process before they say yes, right?
So, it's a lengthy process,
Yeah.
it turns out. It turns out that, if you really want to do this experiment, and we're submitting a paper on how to do such an experiment right now, you need a lot of protective gear, and you need to work through a lot of what the military calls fault scenarios.
Like what happened?
So,
Yeah.
you can imagine some of the conference calls. Like, so let's work through fault scenario number 5. We come in, and there's a hole in the cage, and the snake is gone.
So now you have an Ebola-infected,
Snake
constrictor
loose in the facility.
Yeah, that sounds great.
You have a wily, muscular escape artist.
Right?
In
With
the-
teeth.
Do the incinerator vents?
This is a great science fiction novel.
I
Actually.
don't. Doesn't sound like that much like
And
science
so
fiction.
my
to me.
answer-
Attention,
to
John
false-
Scalzi.
yeah.
Attention, John Scalzi.
My answer to fault scenario 5 was run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my other response is, why is there a freaking hole in the cage?
Well,
How about we get cages with no holes?
Okay. I think
you
fault
apply for a
scenario
job at the
s-
CDC
fault
and you move to
scenario
Atlanta.
6 is tapping the end of the needle.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
7 is that some guy has his hand in the snake's mouth and the gloves are all poked, right? Right.
Absolutely.
Holes poked through the gloves.
And it turns out to do this experiment, you're gonna have to put special wire cages over the air vents.
Right.
Oh, right.
Right.
That would be bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have to get the sort of chain,
Yeah, your chain mail,
mail
yeah,
gloves
yeah.
to go over your regular gloves. You're already in a spacesuit in there,
Right.
So it's kind of nuts.
Wow. So you're gonna go do this?
So I'm not personally.
Okay.
I'm not trained to work in a BSL-4, but they are.
Okay.
And so we're actually writing up a paper on how to do this experiment. We don't have the final scientific results yet. We're still waiting on it. But snakes were put in the BSL-4. They were infected. And then they were euthanized and frozen down, and the analysis has not yet been done.
Wow.
So I don't have a punchline on this.
Yeah, but
Wow.
Just to be able to do the experiment,
That's pretty rad.
actually get somebody to approve the idea of putting a python in a BSL-4 safety lab.
Snakes in a BSL-4.
Who else has done that? That was cool.
So what
Sam
kind of...
Jackson is the hero. He's the main scientist.
I want these monkey fighting snakes
Yeah.
off this Monday to Friday facility.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
What is the timeline from beginning to end of that story? How long did that take?
Well,
Was
it's
that a
40
3
years,
or
Adam.
4?
That's,
Yeah,
that's,
40
that's, haven't you been paying attention?
Well, start to finish, it's more like 6 years. But
Okay.
actually, most of the discoveries happen in the first 2 years, and then all that paperwork takes
Right.
a long time.
You have to, right. So, I mean, yeah, you have to submit a tremendous amount of paperwork to the
Yeah.
facility to get them to.
Now, the other weird thing is that we found is that there are sort of below the radar black market breeders of snakes.
Right.
So they breed
What could go wrong?
exactly. So they breed weird color morphs, and they sell them for lots of money, and they bring in like wild snakes, and
Right.
and they have these. Basically, there are reports of some of these facilities that have like 10,000 snakes in them.
Oh my
What?
God.
Okay. And so, I'm thinking this could be ground zero. It'd be really interesting. So we actually got samples from, certain facilities like this, including people who worked with such facilities or gave snakes to such facilities and back and forth. And what we discovered is just a huge kingdom of these viruses. Not only that, because they're putting them in close proximity, viruses that probably were on other sides of the world are mixing together in the same pool.
And forming
Like
new...
co-infecting and forming new ones and
Wow.
reassorting to create totally new combinations of viruses.
This is terrible.
Like if you wanted to create a brand new hemorrhagic fever virus and do it from, the raw materials, you don't have to have like a bioengineering lab. You
Just
need
a
to have
snake farm.
10,000
snake
snakes.
breeding farm.
Sounds really great.
Hey, so if you're a tested listener and you have a snake breeding farm, stop it. I'm just going to go on and
Maybe
say,
don't.
cut that shit
Yeah.
out.
Or test your snakes for IBD, arenavirus, and call the ones that.
So
But I
then, sorry, Adam.
No.
The larger question is, does okay, you figured out what the virus is. You figured out it's related to these other viruses we know kind of a lot about, but not all the things that we want to know about them, obviously.
Sure.
Is there, like, should Mr. Larry become infected at some point in the future, is there hope for him, or is he a doomed boa constrictor?
There's not a big pharma market for making drugs for snakes.
I mean, I assume so, but if the drugs for the snakes fix the drugs for the drugs for the humans, it's the same drug.
That's a great
Turns
idea.
out,
Yeah, you use the snakes. Actually, that's a fair point. You could use the snake virus, which we could not take the snake virus. We tried to infect mammalian cells. They did not infect.
Okay.
Which I think is a good thing.
Yeah. I think
And
we can all agree on that.
So that means it's in the lab. It's safer to use because you know you're not going to infect yourself. So using it as a model, exactly.
Yeah.
We did the experiment.
Yeah, I'm glad I knew this before we signed up for
What
this.
is the maximum distance from that? It's got to be like 20 feet.
It probably fills the whole room in like 10 minutes.
Absolutely horrifying.
It was a bad day. But you could use this as a model for drug screening because you could use it in a safer way than the hot agent. So you have a point. I would agree with that.
You must be chomping at the bit, though, to do the final analysis.
We are, but unfortunately, we don't control that final analysis. They have to, all the samples and everything must be processed in the by the facility.
I see.
They can't ship things out, and so basically, we're waiting on their schedule, and their schedule depends on what other priorities are going on at US Amrid, and our priority is not the top priority. It's a side project, sort of artsy thing.
What I also get out of this story that I like is that there are now two separate groups of people who have an expertise in a cardiac puncturing of snakes for this purpose. You guys could get you guys should have a challenge.
I have amazing pictures of this, by the way. I will send it to you.
Absolutely love to see that.
Like, are we talking like a giant python, or was it just a little baby one?
5 to 6 feet.
That's a pretty good sized
can-
snake. Yeah.
They get bigger, a lot bigger. Pythons get even larger.
Yeah.
But it's an example of following your curiosity back to the beginning of this. Like that's interesting. I'm going to see what causes that.
This
And
is why
no one would have gone and looked at crazy snakes on YouTube.
Yeah.
With a normal grant procedure and so on. So having a little flexibility and freedom to pursue your curiosity is really important.
You're basically an established lab who's also a lot like a grad student.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish I could always be a grad student. It's the best part of my life.
Before we continue with this week's conversation, I want to let you know who made this episode possible, and that's NordVPN. NordVPN is one of the most trusted online security solutions used by over hundreds of thousands of internet users worldwide. NordVPN's Chrome browser is lightweight and user-friendly from the first click and secures your browsing in seconds. It has thousands of servers in over 61 countries. You can even use it in China because it bypasses the Great China Firewall, and in countries in the Middle East. Get up to 6 simultaneous connections and unlimited bandwidth, which is really important. And with the risk-free 30-day money-back guarantee, there's no reason to put this off. Over the past couple of years, we've had the privilege of traveling all around the world for Tested to places like New Zealand and China and even friendlier countries. And using a VPN, even in those countries, is useful because it localizes you and lets you check things like what's trending on Twitter at home or use Netflix abroad and all sorts of online services. I don't travel without using a VPN. It makes me feel just that much more secure. Start protecting your internet experience today at nordvpn.com/tested and use the code TESTED to get 66% off a 2-year plan. That's about $3.99 per month. Or text TESTED to 900-900. Once again, that's nordvpn.com/tested, and the offer code is TESTED to get 66% off a 2-year plan. Protect yourself online today with NordVPN. And back to the conversation.
Like the core of what you do is sequence. You guys do a lot of sequencing, right?
Yeah, we do a ton of sequencing. I mean, my lab works on many different things, as you can tell.
Yeah.
We work on malaria, Plasmodium falciparum, which isn't a virus. We work on drug development for that. We work on basic biology. We work on various viruses. We work on people problems.
You guys isolated the SARS virus.
We helped identify it in 2003 with the CDC and others.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. We work on bizarre organisms you've probably never heard of, like Balamuthia. It's got a great name, though.
That's a pretty good name.
Yeah.
What is it?
Oh, that's a nasty one. So Can I tell the story?
Please.
All right. So
I know that's why you're here. This is
Look, this is shock radio. This is what we do now.
I'll have to do it without pictures or slides. This will be a challenge for me. All right. So, this all started with a 74-year-old woman here in San Francisco that came to the Chinese hospital with what looked like a UTI infection. She had a little altered mental status. They gave her a Z-Pak, sent her on her way. But then a couple days later, she has complete blindness in one eye, but no wound. Just vision stopped in one eye.
wow.
Okay, so she went to St. Mary's, got a look at her there, and they thought, okay, well, we don't understand what's going on. They did an MRI. Okay, maybe strokes, and you're of that age. It could be something to do with that. But she had a weird cough, too. Anytime there's a weird cough, and she immigrated from China like 12 years ago or something. So they said, go to the general, get a TB exam, just in case.
Right.
A couple days later, her family wheels her into the general, and she's comatose. They actually wheel her in comatose.
Wow.
They hit the emergency red button. They throw her on $150,000 of antibiotics, basically, antiparasitics, anti-TB, antibacterials. I mean, you name it, just boom. And they do an MRI, and the MRI looks as like a grenade went off in her brain.
Whoa.
The brain is decimated. It's like huge, ginormous lesions throughout everything. All the ventricles had ruptured and exploded.
This is within the
inwards.
last 3 days.
About 5 days.
5 days.
About 5 days, and her brain was mush. So there's no recovering this. We know that the patient's not going to make it, and everybody's cognizant of that. And she did expire some number of days later after attempting, a lot to save her, but there's no brain left to save. Biopsies of the brain just show massive necrosis. In fact, the official pathology is necrotizing vasculitis. But that's not a diagnosis. That's just an observation.
That's just describing what happened.
Yeah, it's just like, okay, a bunch of stuff died. And so we, even though we couldn't save the patient in this case, it's still important to us to know what happened. Because, what happened that was so fast. And, it's also true that 50 or 60%, depending on where you're at, of encephalitis is what she had, infection of the brain or inflammation, goes completely undiagnosed, even at UCSF. Although that number's going down now because we're doing all this technology. And so we sequenced the bejesus out of it. Same game. Now the game is, okay, separate what's human genome from non-human genome. And then look at what's not human genome. And then we compare that to the world's collection of organisms. And the organism that pops to the top of the list is called Balamuthia. I'd never heard of it. What the hell is that? Never looked at it. And it turns out it's neither virus nor bacteria nor a fungus.
Is it an amoeba?
It's an amoeba.
Yeah, the brain-eating amoeba.
It is a cousin of the famous brain-eating amoeba. So the famous one is called Naegleria, and that's the one little kids get up their nose in warm lakes in the south, right? And then a week later they're dead.
Right.
Balamuthia is the evil cousin of Naegleria. And unlike
the evil cousin.
It is. Because Naegleria, at least warm lakes up the nose, I know how to prevent that. No one knows where Balamuthia comes from.
They
No one has a
still haven't
clue.
isolated it.
Oh, wow.
No, water, soil, no idea. She lived in Chinatown in an apartment. She didn't garden. She didn't go swimming. Where did she get this?
She have a neti pot?
So she didn't at least didn't admit to using a neti pot. That is another way you can get them.
I don't admit to using a neti pot.
Yeah, well, if you do use sterile water.
Use the sterile water if you use
With
a neti
salt.
pot. That's the lesson.
I use water from a water fountain.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Just get it.
Your days are numbered.
Adam, you have really good puddles here in the mission. They're all clean. It's
When you get a headache, call me.
single origin water.
We'll enroll you quick.
Exactly.
And we tested the vitreous fluid in her left eye, and it had Balamuthia. So the vision loss in the left eye was likely the thing.
Wow.
So we grew this thing in a lab. I'll send you a movie of it from the microscope. It is just the most evil-looking organism on Earth.
How
you
fast
can,
it grows?
Yeah, well, you can put some brain cells in there and watch them eat the brain cells, and it's
In real time.
in real time, and they're just super evil-looking.
Whoa.
And so that might be the end of it. There's not a lot. There's only a few hundred cases of Balamuthia ever reported. And that's probably because they're underdiagnosed.
So it's probably-
We just don't know.
yeah,
There's
so
no
it's either-
diagnostic for it.
Yeah.
You can't send out for it. No one has a test for it.
And it's like horrifically bad luck on both sides of the
Yeah. How much more of that 50% of unknown encephalitis though could be things like that that just don't have a test for it. I got another one coming up for you.
Okay.
And
This is great. This is like Joe's House of Horrors. Let's keep them coming.
I told you he was.
Yeah.
somebody told me once, hey, this is like House. Now, I've never seen House, but I understand the main character uses intuition or something. I'm
It's
like,
never lupus.
Yeah,
Is
screw
the
that.
only thing I know about House.
we use data.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We're like House with
always
data.
using intuition, and someone is always vomiting up blood in the between Acts 3 and 4.
Okay, awesome.
Every episode.
So you asked where the science ends. Well, so when that's the case, we're like, all right, well, we could just close the book there. It's Balamuthia, and we can fold it up and go home. But look, there is no medications for this. But what if there's something on the shelf, off the shelf today, like an improved drug? So we set up what's called a high throughput screen. You basically grow Balamuthia in the lab. A lot of trepidation
Probably
about that. in the lab.
no clips on that one.
Yeah, like whatever
wear
you
your
do,
mask.
do not pick your nose.
Yeah. Oh, God. Oh, no. The sneeze of doom.
And then we basically, there's about 2,700 drugs that are either European or U.S. approved, and we threw them at it, and basically there was an old UTI drug, not the
Fascinating.
azithromycin, there's another called nitroxyline, that actually kills Balamuthia really well.
God, so if she'd gotten the other...
Yeah, but nobody knew.
Yeah,
No one
yeah.
bothered to do it. So we actually just put that out there, just published it.
That's awesome.
But that's sort of, and maybe someday somebody will try that drug in the context of an infection. Because if you're diagnosed with Balamuthia, it's a death sentence.
Yeah.
Like no one lives.
Yeah.
It's the same with Naegleria. It's a very high death rate.
It was always shocking to me, the amoeba stuff, that like the thing that you go out to ponds as a 5th grader to find and bring back to the classroom and look at it under the microscope also will eat your brain.
Yeah. If you put that up your nose, it'll
Don't
kill
put it
you.
don't put it up your nose, kids.
So, and another example of this, if I may.
Please.
The nightmares keep on coming here at Joe's House of Horrors.
This is our early Halloween
Yeah.
episode.
Hey, happy. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's funny. Now and then we get calls from people doing science fiction movies and stuff like that
Yeah.
for consults and asking about this
Yeah.
idea, and a lot of them want to pitch us ideas where a scientist trying to do something actually does something bad that creates something horrible. Like I Am Legends, a scientist trying to make a virus to cure cancer accidentally makes zombies.
Right.
Right. And my argument there is, why does it have to be the scientist? Scientist is a good guy. Isn't curing cancer not a bad thing? I mean, why are you making a scientist? Why was that? Nature comes up with some evil shit.
Well, this is a
Yeah.
friend of mine who was in bioengineering at MIT said we were bellyaching about the scaremongering about GMOs, and he was like, "GM, we've been genetically modifying food since we've been human. That's what's arguably made us human. And by the way, humans are really shitty bioengineers. If you want a great bioengineer, try a virus."
Yeah, nature's got this down.
They're incredible.
And they come up with paths and ways of getting you that are just unbelievable. Well, this leads us to our next case.
Yeah.
This guy was a construction worker, immigrated from Nicaragua, works in construction, and came into our clinics here in the general, again, San Francisco, with double vision and headache. So double vision's always a concern because your cranial nerves are the things that control your motion, the eyeball motion. And if you have meningitis, so infection of the covering of the brain, it can knock out cranial nerves, and then your eyes don't turn the right way. So that was a concern there. They did a lumbar puncture, take a little CSF, cerebral spinal fluid, and count how many cells are in there. Usually it's 0 to 5. This guy has hundreds of cells. So there's something inflammatory going on in there. And based on his history and his MRIs and everything, they're like, all right, this has got to be TB. So they put him on TB drugs for tuberculosis. They all come with steroids. That's important to manage the inflammation. But steroids, anybody who takes steroids, like prednisone, feels better for a while. And this guy feels better for a while. And they wean him off the steroids, and he gets much worse. He starts vomiting, and his face is numb. He starts ringing the ears. So they put him back on steroids and put him back on the TB meds. And you must be not taking your meds. That's what's wrong. You're non-compliant. So they make him come in after work and take his meds in front of a nurse every day.
Wow.
That's what you got to do.
Yeah.
But he doesn't get better, and he gets worse and worse. And now his brainstem is inflamed, and by the time that the sample got to us, he was in super bad shape. Glucose and protein's another measure of health in the CSF. High protein means bad things are happening, and low glucose means bad things are happening. Usually low glucose because something else is eating it besides your brain.
Oh, wow.
And his glucose was undetectable, and which is a sort of an ICU sort of situation. So same game. Take the CSF, sequence the bejesus out of it, ask what's not human. And we did that, separated it all out. Any guesses? So this, if you're in grand rounds,
Okay,
you're
so-
like, okay, doctor's thoughts.
I have no degree to speak of.
So where was he? Where was he before?
He
He
got
was
a
in
biochemistry
Nicaragua?
degree.
Yeah, but it's
He
20 years old, so it's
immigrated from
useless.
Nicaragua, so 8 years ago.
Oh, yeah, but he's a construction worker?
Construction worker. All right.
Is
So,
he in mud?
all right. So you're thinking about soil organisms.
Yeah.
Okay. So tested for histoplasma.
Yeah.
That's one of the soil fungi. Negative. Mycoplasma. A whole bunch of different things. Coccidiomycosis. Negative.
No
negative.
brain fungus then.
So about 50 or 60 diagnostics go out, all negative.
I have no idea. So I'm not a doctor.
So he has thousands and thousands and thousands of reads, pieces of DNA sequence that map to only one thing, and it was pork tapeworms.
Oh, God.
Pork tapeworms.
Yeah, it's called tinea, and that so
The kind that get in the muscle?
Well, let's
Usually-
backtrack. So, how do you get a tapeworm, which everybody thinks about in their gut,
yeah.
in your brain? Do you know?
Yeah, you eat them and then they get in your blood. They lay eggs in your bloodstream or something, and then the eggs attach to the wall of the blood vessels and they burrow through the blood vessels into the muscles.
Wow.
And then grow into full-size tapeworms. Is that
So,
backwards?
It's approximately correct. So
I read a lot of Wikipedia, Joe.
but let's get it. Let's drill down here and get more granular.
Okay.
All right. So you get pork tapeworms in your gut by eating infected pork that
Yeah.
you don't
It's a
cook.
good way to lose
Then-
some weight.
Then you get it in your gut and you shed the organisms, all that. The way that you get the organ invasive form of a pork tapeworm is you must consume. You ready for this?
Oh, you have to eat the feces.
The fecal matter of someone who passes the larval form of the
Oh
worm.
my gosh.
Okay. And so if you eat that,
Right.
that form is ready to go.
Yeah.
And doesn't reside in your gut and go anywhere.
This is why we wash our
usually
hands
likes the
after we
brain.
go to the bathroom.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I remember someone telling me, I remember describing to someone how the toxoplasmosis you catch
Yeah.
from cat feces, and they're like, how would you ever get in contact with cat feces? And I'm like, clearly you've never lived with a cat.
Yeah,
Next
you've
time,
never had a litter box.
next time my daughter asks why she has to wash her hands before dinner or why she shouldn't pick her nose, we're going to load up this episode of Still Untitled, The Adam Savage Project, and she's going to have an
gonna be in
afternoon with Uncle Joe.
But this is really a great situation here because you've got good news. There's great drugs. Albendazole, and maybe not a great drug, but it's an effective drug
Yeah.
against tapeworm. So it's actually treatable.
Oh, that's good. It didn't
Absolutely
yeah.
treatable. And so, imagine the discussion with the patient, and I wasn't there, but I can imagine it too. I've got good news and bad news. Which do you want first?
Oh, you always ask for
The good news is
first.
you're going to be fine. You'll be cured. Bad news, their worms are actually eating your brain
Right now, even as we speak.
as we speak.
But you will be fine. Like the drugs will actually kill them all.
Absolutely. Now, usually this disease, which is called Neurocysticercosis, because it makes cysts in the brain, Neurocysticercosis, which is infection by pork tapeworms. Usually MRIs catch this because you can see the cyst. It usually looks like a hollow hole in the brain
Right.
with a dot in the middle. And the dot is the scolex of the worm.
Wow.
You can see the worms physically on an MRI from there. And in fatal cases, it'll be like Swiss cheese. They just eat the whole brain. But in this guy, the worms never seemed to mature to like full size, giant size worms. And so there were no cysts and visible on any of his MRIs. But, hundreds of thousands of dollars of treatment, a year of essentially being on the wrong drugs.
Of this guy's having his brains
year.
eaten.
And it's because they didn't have the data, right? The data told you what was wrong.
Yeah.
And so this whole approach to diagnosis in the future is don't guess.
Yeah.
Just actually figure it out from the data, unbiased, hypothesis free.
When $1,000 to do the genome sequencing seems expensive until you think about what the other 35 tests that somebody would get
The
prescribed are.
Balamuthia patient, her hospital bill was well north of $1 million.
Yeah.
Wow.
And $150,000 of antibiotics, none of which work against amoebas. So knowing what the cause is gives you a chance to actually
So is there anyone
try
that's
something.
building this into a viable business model? 100 computer cores to devote to any one of these?
Yeah, so it turns out UCSF is the only place in the country right now where you can actually, any doctor can order this test, metagenomic sequencing for encephalitis and meningitis. Your doctor can order it today.
Wow.
And UCSF is actually the only place that does
Wow.
it. I'm sure lots of others will in the future because this is catching on really quick. But it goes from bench to bedside now. Like you can actually do it. It's not just in the laboratory anymore.
Now I'm curious about how nervous you are, or how scared you are of viruses in the permafrost and organisms deep within our permafrost starting to come out because of climate change.
Which
and
is
global
worse,
warming.
the permafrost methane or the permafrost viruses?
Well,
Yeah.
it's just going to suck while we die.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unclear what ancient viruses, what they'll look like, or if they'll have to go through an adaptation. If the organisms around them have changed, they'll have to change too.
Right.
And so, the science fiction story of the million-year-old virus thawing and then, immediately being able to infect a human, I'm not so sure about that.
So this is the big philosophical question. Do you end up I look at the tenacity of these organisms, and it fascinates me. And it joins this other part of fascination I have for extremophiles, that you look in the most hostile places on Earth and you're going to find it teeming with life.
Yep.
And that makes me believe that life is an emergent property of matter.
Sure.
What do you think?
You should drop into the DRC right now.
The DRC?
Forget the permafrost. You want to go and get some new virus?
What's the DRC?
The Democratic Republic of Congo.
Oh yeah.
So we just did a little short survey in Uganda not recently of just kids with fever without malaria. We plucked a few new viruses right off the tree, right off the bat, from mosquito-borne virus. You do not have to look far or thaw 50,000-year-old ice to find some evil stuff.
Wow.
Right in our midst. That's my point. Is you want to go to where biodiversity is.
Right.
Go in the jungles. Some remote islands in the Philippines or in the middle of Central Africa or the Mekong River.
So we should cut down all the jungles.
Don't do that.
Okay.
This is actually one of the early Carl Pilkington podcasts with Ricky Gervais, where Carl Pilkington says, "I don't like to travel," and Ricky's like, "You're a stupid kid. Why won't you travel?" And Carl Pilkington says, "Look, if I go to why would I go to a place where I need shots to go there? Otherwise, I'll die." And Ricky Gervais said, "Actually, that's the most sensible thing I've ever heard. You're totally right. Just don't go there."
Well, there you go. Not for everybody.
What is your latest obsession, Joe?
So, this idea of using an unbiased approach, a data-driven approach to capture things, that's great. You live in, California or the United States, you can send a sample there. I mean, that's well and fine. And it's kind of it is an expensive test. It's not going to be a cheap diagnostic that can go around the world or anything.
But I had a face rash a few years ago, and we spent $10,000 just figuring out what the face rash was.
Give me a call next time.
Yeah, I might. It's still there. It just doesn't show anymore.
You're going to have to get 5 people to hold Will down.
First, you have to find my heart. It's 3 sizes too small, and no.
I mean, there's amazing reservoirs just on human bodies. I mean, the stuff that hides out in eyeballs is amazing. So we had a whole project where we tap eyeballs to see what's inside them and
that
sequence
sounds
them.
great. I'm totally going to come to your cocktail parties.
Usually only patients who really, really want
I
it.
would assume so, yes.
So actually, do you want to hear the eyeball story or not?
Please, yeah. Let's.
It sounds like a good way to get a real body horror banger going here.
Happy Halloween, everybody.
Yeah.
And then we'll finish with the big vision.
Okay.
I don't want to leave the big vision out.
All right.
Because I was just about to talk about the big global vision.
Okay.
All right. So the eyeball. All right. So, a thing called uveitis, which is inflammation of the eye, is another one of those, hey, 50% of it, we have no idea what it is. And people, when they lose their vision or inflammation of the eye, they're pissed. I mean, it hurts.
It's really scary.
It's really
it is
scary.
super scary.
And it turns out people really care about their vision.
It's an important part of our lives.
And so I had a talented ophthalmologist in the lab. Her name is Tweed. She's like, yeah, I will tap those eyeballs and let's sequence what's inside them because maybe we can help some of these people understand that. So one of her patients was this guy who came in. He'd grown up in Germany, and this will become relevant. In 1992, he remembers distinctly having a full body rash and fever. His whole body.
Wow.
And he had a fever. He didn't forget it. And in a couple days, it was gone. Never thought about it again. But then he developed this uveitis in one eye, then the other eye some years later. And when he presented, he had asymmetric heterochromia. So
his eyes were different colors.
His eyes are different colors.
What is asymmetric heterochromia?
Because they're 2 different colors. So they were both brown to begin with.
Right.
One was now like crystal light white blue, and the other one was a mix of brown
God,
and
something
blue.
horrifying was eating his iris.
Exactly.
Oh,
so his
God.
iris is degrading over time from chronic inflammation. And so anytime you see somebody with asymmetric heterochromia, you give my number.
Hey, I have good news and bad news.
You're going to die, but I know a guy's going to be fascinated.
We see a tap.
They're going to name something after you, and then they're going to jab a needle in your eye.
This is really interesting. So we get the intraocular fluid from this guy, and we do the same thing. This is the same game. Let's just sequence the bejesus out of it and find out what's in there. Separate, host from not host, human from not human, and we match it all up. Again, tons and tons of sequence reads to one thing and one thing only. Any guesses? What family? Even kingdom? What?
Fungus?
Not a
We haven't had a
fungus.
fungus yet.
We haven't done a
Bacteria.
fungus. We have good fungus stories too.
I know you. Look, I know you have good fungus stories. I have no doubt, Joe.
It was a virus.
Really?
It was a virus, but no, it wasn't any old virus. It was rubella. Okay.
Whoa.
Now this guy grew up in Stuttgart.
Oh, that's what the full body
Germany.
rash was.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In Stuttgart, Germany. So in Germany in the 90s, they only vaccinated girls.
Oh, because it makes girls sterile, right?
Well, so it congenital birth defects.
Okay.
It causes birth defects. So if you're a boy, well, you're not going to have a baby. So why should we vaccinate you? Well, it turns out it's an RNA virus, kind of like Ebola and other things, different family though. And if it gets in your eye, the eye is one of those immunologically privileged locations that it's not under surveillance the whole time by the body.
It's avascular.
Well, it's got fluid flow and stuff, but
Right.
the immune cells don't go there.
If you had a lot of
Yeah.
white blood cell clumps in your eyeball, it
it'd
would
be
cause vision problems.
Exactly. And so the virus got in there, set up shop, and had been replicating in there for 21 years.
Well, that's exciting.
Oh, but wait. Is that true or not? I mean, that's kind of an outrageous proposition. You're saying that the virus was replicating for 21 years in this guy's eyeball. Well, it turns out we can actually prove it. So we took the virus out, we sequenced his whole genome, and because those viruses that, the replication machinery for those viruses make errors with a predefined
Oh, yeah, you
frequency.
can tell how long they've been there.
The number of errors is a clock.
Yeah.
I can tell you how long it's been there.
Wow.
Spot on 21 years. And the closest relative, 1992, Stuttgart, Germany.
That is fascinating.
Published it. And so,
Crazy.
so this guy, okay, so here's the thing. He got the MMR vaccine when he came to the United States. He's got a normal immune system. So his eyes are doing the experiment you'd never be funded to do.
Right.
Let's evolve a virus that could evade the vaccine and the immune system.
Yeah.
And it's going to take about 20 years of constant passaging, and we'll evolve something.
So what is that, like
still
20,000
lives.
generations or millions of generations, right?
Lots and lots
Yeah.
and lots.
That's amazing.
Wow.
So luckily we tested his tears, not shedding rubella. So
Oh,
we
that's
don't think
good.
like he's walking around like shedding rubella. But, it's interesting to think that, all these people from Europe, boys mainly, that have uveitis, are all doing the
Their
experiment
eyes
in
are
their
festering
eyes.
hellholes.
That's right. And, you want to write a science fiction book about the virus that now nobody is immune to.
Wow.
Christoph Waltz weeps rubella.
So I was talking to we were doing an episode on whips, Indiana Jones's whips, and I called up Neil Stevenson. We were the science fiction author.
Yeah, sure.
And we were talking about something else, but he's like, "What are you working on?" And I said, I'm about to get the high-speed shot of a tip of the whip breaking the speed of sound. It's non-trivial from a methodological standpoint, and we did it. And he was like, "Oh," he said, I did a bunch of research on whips for my last book." And the thing is when Neil tells you he's done a lot of research, it's been a dive, right? And he ends up finding the first guy to figure out that the speed of sound is a thing that can be broken. And he's this French scientist from the 1920s. And it all begins in the end of World War II, where there are no more trucks. Sorry, the end of World War I, there's no trucks left in Europe. They've all been utilized for the war effort, and people still have to move commerce. So they start reintroducing horse-driven teams to drag large vehicles, to drag trucks effectively. But they no longer have buggy whips or anything. So they start using what's left, which is in the factories. They find that braided copper grounding straps make terrific whips.
Oh my God.
So this guy comes in the 20s to this French doctor, and what he's got an irritation in his eye. And when the doctor looks really close, what he finds is these microscopic metal cylinders embedded in the lens of his eye.
What?
And he asks all these different things, and none of it reaches any conclusion. But then a few years later, someone else comes in with the same exact condition, and then he starts to triangulate their two histories. And they were both truck drivers in Europe right after World War I. And it turns out he was the one that figured out that the tip of a whip breaks the speed of sound, because as that braided copper grounding strap breaks the speed of sound, it exceeds the tensile strength of the copper, sending tiny, tiny microscopic shards of copper in every direction, including into the eye of the guy.
That is nuts.
Totally nuts. And then he actually manages. Neil sent me. He had to have this French or German paper translated that had never been translated. Then he found a scientist who had actually used in the 20s. chemical flashes to isolate and show that the tip of a whip breaks the speed of sound. This magnificent methodology to do it. Yeah.
Wow.
That's cool.
Really cool. This type of investigational stuff I find endlessly fascinating, as you know.
Why I'm in the business too.
Can I ask a dumb DNA question, Joe?
Yeah, sure.
What do you think about like the commercial DNA sequencing stuff? I mean, there's been a lot of people talking about that because they caught the California Strangler guy.
Yeah, sure. Through Ancestry. Yeah.
Yeah, through Ancestry and stuff like is this a good thing? I mean, when I asked my doctor about DNA tests, he's like, we're good. You know, the 23andMe doesn't provide any actionable information or whatever on.
Well, now it
on what
turns
your
out that
causes
even if
are.
you or I, as white, relatively European males, even if we don't get sequenced, so many of us have been sequenced, you could find us.
That's how the
Yeah,
Strangler.
you can just infer you.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. We can be inferred.
You can be inferred. So, I mean, depending on your genetic makeup and what you've inherited, there might be disease-related mutations of interest to you. The ancestry might be of interest to you. I think it is fascinating to look at one's ancestry. There are more and more cancers that are actionable or susceptibilities. Whether a 1% more chance of getting diabetes is going to matter to you or not, probably not. But there are lots of other things in there that might be of interest. And the more we learn and the more we collect and link genotype to phenotype, the more actionable.
Hold on, you should explain genotype to phenotype.
So genotype, what your DNA is, like the actual sequence, and phenotype, the manifestation of your diseases in your life and everything else.
Okay,
And so the more linking of that, the better the information becomes. So we're at the early days, obviously, but as millions of people get sequenced and their clinical data gets linked to those records, then we learn, oh wait, this combination of 15 things really is important.
So to a certain extent, you're helping build the large
absolutely,
database.
you got to build the database to begin this. Now, I think, from my own interest, the actionable stuff is the stuff that isn't you, that's in you.
Right.
Right, that's the interesting part.
We can get at that really quick without any interpretation. Balamuthia in the brain, that's pretty clear.
No privacy implications from scanning the Balamuthia in the brain, right?
Well, it's not human. It's not yours.
Exactly. Go nuts.
So actually, that brings me to the next idea, right? So the bigger idea here is, okay, instead of just doing it in our UCSF and major institutions like this, what if we could do something bigger? And so that's what I'm doing at the Chan Zuckerberg BioHub, which is where I'm co-president, and I also have my lab at UCSF. We, together with the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, which is a separate organization, have built a new software platform called IDSeq. And so here's the deal. The sequencing is getting cheap. I mentioned that a few times. You can do sequencing almost anywhere. These sequencers are pretty affordable, and you can get it done. But the compute, really hard, really expensive, and getting more expensive as time goes on.
Well, as a technologist, I've learned that technology gets less expensive as time goes on, right? So
yeah, that's certainly true for sequencing, where the cheaper, the cheap sequence is accelerating at a rate much faster than Moore's law.
Right.
Much faster than Moore's law.
So the problem is you're outpacing
computers.
the rate at which the computers can expand. Okay,
right,
got it.
I see.
Okay,
Right.
By far.
There's calculus here.
Yes.
Okay.
And the more that you sequence, the larger the database that must be sequenced. So it's not just the speed of the computers, but the physical search space is exponentially growing faster than Moore's law.
Okay.
So that means the compute, you can't.
And also Moore's law is slowing down.
You can get this sequencer into Bangladesh and Dhaka or something like this and do the sequence, but you can't analyze it. Not everybody has a giant server farm with thousands of CPUs on premises. And so, let's just take that out of the equation. Let's eliminate that barrier. So the IDSeq platform is an open source free platform in the cloud that will allow anybody in one of these microbiology labs, like in the middle of Bangladesh or something like this, to sequence cases, meningitis or disease surveillance, like what is happening in my country. I've seen a spike of encephalitis. We'll sequence that, upload it to the cloud. All the compute is done for you. The separating of the human from the bugs and the identification and all this.
Wow.
Now imagine, right, that we have lots of these locations around the world doing this. Then what you were creating is basically an emerging or new pathogen intelligence platform. It's a surveillance system.
It's like a barometric pressure data network,
but sensors
for
all over
viruses,
the world.
Yeah.
And it would be, and if people are doing this all the time, there would be a real-time molecular layer of pathogen sequencing. Why did it take a year to figure out that Zika had made the jump all the way over to South America?
Right.
You shouldn't have taken a year. You should have picked that stuff up a long time ago. And if you get that early warning, this is like your early warning radar for stuff that's circulating around.
Right.
And so we're partnering with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We got a RFA, a grant open right now. For those listeners who care, you can go to BMGF and you can apply for the grant. The grant, you have to be from a low resource country.
Okay.
But the grant gets you the sequencer, supplies for sequencing samples for 18 months, free compute and storage, engineering support, and training here in California. And then put you back.
Dude,
that's awesome.
I want to spin up a whole bunch of these sites around the world and create this sort of, this global dashboard that isn't just field reports or published papers or newspaper articles, which is what most dashboards are today, but a real-time molecular dashboard.
It's like a
of what
weather
is going on.
satellite for what's going on in biomes.
I want the big board. The big board.
We can't let him see the big board.
Exactly.
I literally was just writing about Dr. Strangelove this morning.
I want the big board.
They'll
That's
see the
awesome.
big board.
And we're going to make it.
That's amazing.
That's really, really cool, Joe.
So that's the big vision.
Joe, I thank you for being an unbelievably stimulating guest, and this is not your last time on the podcast. I hope. I'll
come
come
back
on
anytime you guys want.
We're going to title this the scariest episode is still entitled yet. Maybe ever.
Happy Halloween, everybody.
You guys should visit the lab.
Yes.
I would love to.
Yeah, I want to do that.
I promise it's safe.
I'm going to wear a
I'm going to
mask.
commit to come visit before the end of the year.
Come on over anytime. We're just, about 2 miles from here.
No, I know. You're right there. That's where
Cool.
my doctor is.
Where can people find you, Joe, if they want to know more?
So my website, DeRisiLab.ucsf.edu, or at the Chan Zuckerberg Biohub, czbiohub.org.
Okay.
We'll put those links here underneath.
Somebody will.
Yeah, somebody will take care of that.
Probably Norm. I don't know. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for coming by, Joe.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for
very
having me.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Thanks for listening this week. And once again, I want to thank the sponsor that makes this episode possible, and that's NordVPN, one of the most trusted online security solutions with thousands of servers in over 61 countries. NordVPN's Chrome browser is lightweight and user-friendly from the first click and secures your browsing in seconds. I can't stress the importance of using a VPN, not only for security, but also convenience when traveling. We've traveled so much over the past couple of years, whether it's in countries with firewalls, without firewalls, and it just makes sense to feel more secure using a VPN. I've had scares in countries where I've clicked links and recognized a phishing scam, but with a VPN, I can bypass that and also use streaming services that I otherwise would not be able to access when overseas. Start protecting your internet experience today at nordvpn.com/tested and use the offer code TESTED to get 66% off a 2-year plan. Or you can just text TESTED to 900-900. Once again, thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.